We are back on Morning Line. Our guest with us this morning is Michael Cunningham with Animal Rescue Corps, taking your calls at 737-7587 on the work they do, you know, on the front lines of rescuing animals from hoarding situations, puppy mills, natural disasters, bringing them back to the emergency shelter here in Middle Tennessee. And then once they're ready and cleared, going to various shelters around the country to be adopted out. Again, you yourself do not adopt out any animals. You then farm them out to these various rescues that take care of that.
Right. We have to stay neutral.
Right.
Okay. So we don't charge for our services to law enforcement, and we give the animals, and then sometimes we pay our placement partners to take them. Mm-hmm. In some cases, the animals are going to have very expensive medical treatments that are going to be needed before they're going to be available for adoption. And our placement partners don't always have the resources to pay for all those things. So in some cases, animals will come with a small grant to address heartworm or other issues, eye surgeries, things like that. That can be very, very expensive.
Yeah. And we should say, how many paid staffers, I mean Corps staff, on this large organization? Is it 4?
We have 5 paid staff. 5
paid staffers, okay, for the whole thing, and no one's getting rich doing this, folks. And it's really a labor of love. But beyond that, I mean, it is all volunteers.
It's volunteer-based.
I mean, it's incredible. The army of just incredible volunteers, from just the folks like my wife who comes and helps and has learned, to the veterinarians and others. So it's all volunteers, and the wonderful donations, especially from some of your corporate donors like Bissell. Let's take a call from Ed. Ed, good morning. Hey, Ed.
Good morning, Nick. Can you hear me okay?
I sure can. Go ahead. Good hearing from you, Ed.
Same here, partner. You know, like I say, I watch the shows most mornings. I'm glad to see they've got these rescue shelters to take care of these animals. I don't understand why the animals are not allowed to, he may answer this, are not allowed to go with the owners. Anyway, I'm so glad to see they've got this, and there's I know there's other rescuers too, which I am so glad to see, because it used to be animals were left on their own when the family took off, and now they got some help. My little granddaughter wanted a cat. And me and my wife agreed to let her have one. We had to keep it here because the dog that they've got at their house, he don't like cats.
Yeah.
So he stays here, and she went and got one, and now little Tommy, he's all part of the family over here, and we got another little dog here my daughter got from a rescue, and my granddaughter, she couldn't. She has allergies, and so we brought him right over here, and now he sleeps in the bed with me every night.
Yeah.
And so does Tom. He sleeps right down at my feet, and little old Murph. They're precious. You know, they're not throwaways like a lot of people, you know, feel like throwing them away and all this other crap. They're precious. They've got feelings. And they know who loves them and who don't.
Ed, you know, Ed's a good friend, and that's exactly the kind of owner you want out there. It's wonderful, and he appreciates it, and it opened his eyes a bit. I mean, he's right. They become part of your family. I know how much you wouldn't be doing what you're doing, Michael, except for the fact that how many dogs do you have?
That's a ridiculous question.
How many dogs do you have? Okay, well,
I have 10 dogs.
You have 10. And of course, we had 5. Now we're down to 4, but we'll probably be in the market for more. But he's right. When
you have a vacancy.
We do have a vacancy, okay. So we'll work on that. It's just, it's fun to have, and they're part of the family. But I was going to ask you, he talks about the throwaway culture, and one of the frustrations for me was that we know that a lot of people adopted animals during COVID because they wanted company. They were home and all this. And then some of these despicable individuals, once things started getting back to normal, though we've taken a step back now with COVID, unfortunately, but gave up the dogs. And I know that was one of the reasons. Don't you think we've seen such a sudden surge in animals being put up at shelters and for adoption or being cut loose to go stray?
There's a few factors that are causing this wave of animals.
And there's a lot right now. There are very few vacancies anywhere in the South.
Really, there are very few vacancies. Part of that is the backup at the veterinary offices for the spay neuter.
That's number one.
Everything has slowed down because of COVID. You know, they just can't do the volume that we could do before. So that kind of backs everything up as well. They can't complete an adoption until the animal has been altered and they can no longer reproduce.
Right.
So then you also have the fact that people were working at home and now they're going back to work or going into their offices or traveling more, and that opened, you know, all of that
we can't leave the dog home alone now, so well, I guess can't keep him anymore.
You know,
despicable.
It is despicable, and it's really unfortunate.
And then, of course, with the storms that we've seen of late, a lot of that has kind of caused a problem on that front. It just seems to me like it's just so busy right now at these places. Still, though, there are people looking to adopt in other parts of the country.
Absolutely.
No problem.
Absolutely.
Okay. Then get those dogs up. Let's take a call from Joe. Joe, good morning. Hi, Joe.
Good morning, Nick.
Hey.
I appreciate what this gentleman does, rescuing these animals, but it's one thing that I'd like to address. People go out, especially these younger people, both of them are working, they get a dog, and they go to work, they put them in a cage, leave them in a cage all day long, and don't have any association with the dog.
Yep.
And I know I've been food with dogs all my life, and I know of a case of people had a little dog, and they kept it in a cage all his life. The woman wouldn't let it upstairs, so they kept it downstairs in the cage. And then that little dog, I kept him some for a while, but it didn't belong to me, so I didn't have no say-so over it. But that little dog was scared to death.
Sure.
Of everything. He hadn't been socialized at all. So I wish people, if they're going to go out and buy an animal, that they have a facility to keep the dog and not put it in a cage and leave it in a cage all its life.
Put some thought into it. Have a plan. You don't have to necessarily buy a dog. You can rescue a dog. But yeah, socialization is a big thing you have to deal with. What he just described there, a lot of the dogs you encounter were exactly like that woman's little dog that was kept in a cage forever. So when you let them out, doesn't mean they're vicious. They might be scared. They might snap at you because they're not sure. It's just they put yourself in their shoes. If you were locked in a cage 24/7 from the time you were born, and all of a sudden that cage opened, I mean, you don't know what to do.
Right. They have no life experience.
Right.
They don't think abstractly, right? Everything's kind of associated with a memory and some type of experience that they had before. And if that's new to them, they're going to approach it with fear, caution. If it's a negative first experience, then that's where they're going to kind of go mentally when those situations present themselves again. I have to say that our partners that we partner with, our rescue partners, the people who are tasked with finding the homes, finding the loving homes for the animals that we rescue, are going to do a really good job in determining whether those people are a proper home for each one of those animals.
Right.
They're going to look at how much they're home during the day, how much they're working, how much they're gone all the time. Whereas anyone can go out and buy a dog from a breeder and keep it in a cage in
No
their
questions
house.
asked. The breeders don't care.
12,
They just
15,
want the money.
20 hours a day.
Right.
Rescue groups are going to do a much better job of vetting those adopters, whether or not they're a proper home.
It's funny. I have a friend I was talking to yesterday who's in the process now of adopting a specific breed from a rescue, and it's it's like a TBI background check. I mean, and at first you know, I've been through this too, and we've had to adopt, and we've adopted most of our dogs, and it's at one point you're like, wait a second, I mean, come, and then you realize and you stop and go, there's a purpose to this. Yeah. I'm glad they're this thorough. It means they care that much about the dog and want to make sure, and they're asking some personal questions. How long are you going to be gone? And you know, how do you feel about collars? And what do you do? Blah blah this and that. It can be quite thorough.
Veterinary reference checking, you know.
And they'll turn you down.
Absolutely. Do you keep your animal vaccinated, up to date?
Right.
Do you keep them on heartworm treatments? You know, all those things are going to be looked into to make sure that you're a proper home.
Yep. And so just don't be surprised when you go to some of these shelters. The really good ones are going to be asking you a few questions. It's not personal. It's not that they don't trust you. They do it to everyone. It's just to make absolutely sure that, you know, it's going to a good, safe home. And if yours is, they'll be fine with it. And there's wiggle room. There's not always right or wrong answers to all of these questions. They just kind of want to know.
Absolutely.
They kind of want to know. And they may help match you up with a breed that's better suited to you if you're not sure what you're after.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the thing. Some people just see a puppy, oh, I'll take it. And then they realize it's not really suited to their lifestyle.
You know, puppies are really cute.
Yeah.
And taking an animal into your home is really an emotional type decision. You know, you're not looking at your budget going, oh, well, I think I've got a spot here for a little dog or a cat in my budget.
Right.
It's an emotional decision. So sometimes that kind of compels people toward an animal, and it may not be a great fit for them farther down the road. You know, this animal may take a lot of exercise. You may have physical limitations. Do you want a lap dog? You know, that type of thing. These are things that are all taken into consideration when you adopt.
Put some thought into it. You know, you talked about going on these rescues, the front lines, and again, that is really where it first happens. And you mentioned it can be dangerous. And you've shared some stories with me, and I've done some stories on ARC and what you've encountered. You talked about when they're kept in the cages, a lot of the urine, feces, and stuff, it builds up. And truly, it's awful. To the point where sometimes you have to wear respirators going in, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have a lot of
suits
exposure to, and sometimes I have to wear Tyvek suits. It's not just the gases that are building up in the house. Sometimes there's just the property themselves, especially in hoarding situations. There's a lot of other items that can be very, very dangerous to you. Sharp metal. You can't really tell what is all around you in a hoarding house. You know, this one I was just in recently was up to about my shoulders, and there's little trails that kind of go through the house, but it's very easy to get cut. Everything's, you know, covered in feces, urine. It can be a very dangerous place. A lot of snakes, spiders. Sometimes, you know, I get covered in my Tyvek suit one time. I was covered in roaches in a house in Monteagle one time.
Really? It was that infested. Yeah, talk about then some of the various animals. I mean, dogs and cats come to the forefront. That's what people think of first. But the range of animals that you have rescued over the years, talk, you know, beyond dogs and cats.
So when we go onto a property, we take 100% of the animals.
Everything.
We take every animal. You think about if they were children and someone was abusing or neglecting 5 of their 10 kids, you wouldn't leave the other ones there. Right. You have to get everybody off the property. And when we're working with law enforcement, all of the animals are the physical evidence of the criminal.
All the way down to mice.
All the way down to mice. Last summer, we had Operation Cagetail, which was out in Buchanan, Tennessee. We pulled 627 animals off of that property, including there was a little boy in a cage on that one, 18 months old, kept in a cage, surrounded by pythons and boa constrictors.
You may remember that story. I did a story on it. Actually, it became a national story because the little boy, for whatever reason, was kept in this cage, not far from a box of mice and a room full of boa constrictors in there. It's like a horror movie.
Yeah, we see the worst. But on that property, we pulled 300 mice and 200 rats off of that property who were being bred
to feed the snakes?
Actually, no. The snakes were so big they were eating rabbits, but the mice, and the rats were being sold at a flea market
And so you took those in. We'll go to a break, but what did you do with the mice and rats? Where do you adopt those out to?
There are rodent rescues.
Rodent rescues.
Yes, and a lot of humane societies will use those, will adopt them out as pets. And people say, well, how do you make sure that it's not going to be fed to a snake or whatever? Well, there are feeder mice, there are feeder rats that people can buy in pet stores for just a couple of dollars. But to adopt a mouse or a rat, it's considerably more. So people aren't going to go and adopt a rat and go through all that to then feed to a snake.
Good point. Good point. There are. It's not super expensive because you want it not to be prohibitive for someone to adopt.
Absolutely.
But there are expenses involved with adopting any of the animals from a shelter or rescue. Let's take a break. Back with more phone calls. Our final segment with Michael Cunningham right after this.